India has the third largest population of Muslims in the world. One person in every 6 follow Islam here. Gujarat, a state on the western coast, is home to a sizable number of Muslims. They trace their roots to traders from West Asia. Communities have been living here since Islam came to India in the 8th century. Initially, they used to trade in spices, which some families continue to this day. With business as a common link, Muslims coexisted with Hindus and other communities in the streets of the capital, Ahmedabad. The violence of the 2002 riots created a divide between Muslims and Hindus. Many Muslims were killed, their houses and factories burnt.
मैं याद करना भी नहीं चाहता। मेरे एक दोस्त थे, दोस्त की मतलब मैं सिस्टर थी, मॉप थी, मॉप ने पूरा उठा के फेंका। तो वो सब चीज़ों को मैं कहता हूँ याद करना नहीं चाहता।
2:30 around in the night with a 20 to 23-year-old baby. Now what all should I carry? They said that take your necessities and walk out. I mean, what should I carry? If I carry my baby, I don't have a third hand to hold anything else.
In my office, which is at Shalimar Complex, it was also totally burned. There were 90 offices, shops on the ground floor, first, second floor and so on. It was like, black suit and all that. Even after 1 year, nobody dared even visit that place.
Many Muslims felt they had no future in a place they had called home. But it has been over 12 years now, and Gujarat has never seen such riots again. How did people manage to rebuild their lives? How did they manage to move on? Why did they continue to call Gujarat their home? Islam first came to India through traders from West Asia. Gujarat was an important trading place among the Indian Ocean rim. India was a midway point, for traders would travel onwards further east, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines. Islam spread to communities in Southeast Asia through this trade route. In Gujarat, Muslim traders settled near ports or large cities. They adopted the Gujarati language and cultural practices of the local community. Today, there are many Muslims who can trace their family history to West Asia. Zafar Sharaswala is a successful Muslim businessman, and his family came to Gujarat 3 centuries ago.
We are actually Sunni Boris, and Sunni Boris have come to India about 250 years from Saudi Arabia. And Sunni Boris are traders traditionally. Our business, which of course extended family is running, was set up in 1890 by my great-grandfather. We are 5th generation entrepreneur. We have this balancing of being religious, not fundamentalist, not extremist, religious, and educated and into business.
Zayeda is the principal of a school where underprivileged children from her community study. She remembers growing up in a family that was focused on providing good education for children, boys and girls.
Basically, I am born and brought up in Ahmedabad. At that time, if I remember, if I used to tell someone that I live in Paladi and I study in GLS, so that too were my status symbols as a child, because that two things were a privilege which everybody did not had at that time, because girl education was not that very popular. Second thing, going to an institute like Gujarat Law Society, It was a well established and one of the most esteemed education institutes there.
Rizwan is an architect with a successful practice in Ahmedabad. He grew up having friends from other communities.
हम लोग रायखंड में रहते थे, अहमदाबाद का जो प्रोमिनेंट पुराना एरिया है, वॉल्ड सिटी का एरिया है, वहाँ पे मतलब मैं दैट वाज अ मुस्लिम डोमिनेंट एरिया, मगर उसके करीब में दैट इज़ हार्डली वॉकिंग डिस्टेंस पे नॉन मुस्लिम्स भी रहते थे। साथ में मतलब मैं खेलते थे, साथ में मिलते थे, जुलते थे। सबसे बड़ी बात, स्कूल में जाते थे तो स्कूल की भी जो मतलब मैं ऑटो रिक्शा से उससे साथ में सैर करते थे, और स्कूल्स में तो मतलब मैं हम लोग साथ में ही पढ़ते थे।
Religion was never an issue for Zaida when she was in school.
Who follows which religion question came very lately in my life. It's because of the education system and the cosmopolitan culture which was there in Ahmedabad. When I was going to school every morning, when there was prayers, they were taking prayers of each and every community. So there was no question who's following what. None of my classmates ever asked me that, are you a Muslim? So are you non-vegetarian? Somebody is Jain and he is having some other type of food. So this was not there at all.
After completing his education, Zafar found work in England. Rizwan completed his course in architecture and got into practice with 3 partners who were Hindus. Zaidia got married. In early 2002, she had returned to her mother's home as she was expecting her first child. They seemed to be happy in their world. No one had a clue that their lives were going to be shattered. In early 2002, a train carrying a group of Hindu pilgrims was set fire by a mob of Muslims at Godhra, a small railway station in Gujarat. There were conflicting reports on the incidents. Initially, rumors suggested that the mob had reacted to the harassment of a Muslim girl by some of the pilgrims on the train. However, later investigation showed that the burning of the train seemed to be premeditated, since the mob was carrying iron rods and petrol bombs.
The first thing I remember of 2002 is the newspaper which came into my hand in the morning. Around 7:30 I saw a burning train picture in the newspaper and I was like, that what has happened? Out of my house, I was at my mother's house, I went out and I saw some clouds of smoke. So something very nearby was burning. Every time somebody or the other used to give us a call, or landline पे फ़ोन आता है, कभी मोबाइल पे फ़ोन आता है, and here somebody is shot, यहाँ पे कुछ जल गया, यहाँ पे कुछ हो गया, वहाँ पे कुछ हो गया, and I was like, where is the police, where is the system, what are they doing? I just went out of my house, I was at my mother's house, I went out and I saw some clouds of smoke. So something very nearby was burning.
Within hours following the incident, Hindu groups reacted violently. Muslims' localities were targeted across Gujarat. Their houses and businesses were burnt down. Rizwan was working late inside his office. As news crept in, he slowly became aware of the riots happening outside on the streets of Ahmedabad.
मैं मेरे ऑफिस पे बैठा हुआ था रात को 8:30-9 बजे तक, मतलब मैं जब तक तो मुझे पता भी नहीं था क्या हो रहा है। एक न्यूज़ आई कि मतलब मैं गोधरा में मतलब मैं इस तरह से लोग जा रहे थे, उसको मतलब मैं लोगों को जलाया गया हुआ है। जिस तरह से न्यूज़ आते गए, बात होते गई, यानी वो मतलब इट्स जस्ट लाइक अ जो सोसाइटी नहीं होती, जंगलियत, बारबियत जो बोलते हैं उसको, मतलब में वो माहौल धीमे धीमे लग रहा था और उसके हिसाब से पूरा एनवायरनमेंट बिल्कुल बिगड़ रहा था।
As the riots spread, Muslims had nowhere to hide. They became scared of the future.
I was not here. I was in the UK when 2002 happened, but my whole family was here. In fact, I used to be totally connected because my family was here every day, 10 to 15 phone calls, and then I was part of it. People used to say, oh, we can't live here. There was thinking of exodus happening. A lot of people thought, ye ab hamare liye jagah nahi hai. We will have to move to England, or some people thought, we can't stay here, or some thought we need to go in a Muslim neighborhood, that as if it's the end of the world.
Zaida had to suddenly move into a refugee camp with her 1-month-old son. Her house was no longer safe. Her husband was living in another town and could not travel to Ahmedabad. She had to share a room with several riot-affected families.
in a 2-room flat. We were around 25-30 people with a small baby, and there were many other children also, but my child was the youngest one. We stayed there for 2-3 days, and every time we were like, we had to ask that, is our house on fire? We were not even in that state of mind कि हम ये पूछे कि हमारा घर नहीं जला. हमको ये पूछना पड़ता था कि हमारा जल गया कि बाकी है.
The events that took place in the riots remain etched in Rizwan's mind. He wishes he could forget them.
मैंने मेरी आंखों से देखा नहीं है. उनका कहना है कि वो लोग टेरेस पे खड़े थे, देखे थे. मॉप थी, मॉप ने पूरा उठा के फेंका. यानी मतलब मैं पूरा बदतमीज़ी की, सब कुछ की. लकीली ऐसा कह सकते कि मॉप इतनी भी बारबर इतनी थी, परेशान करा, जो कुछ भी फिज़िकली जो कुछ भी करना था वो छोड़ दिया, मगर रेप कैसा कुछ इंसिडेंट नहीं हुआ. जो ऐसे केसेस मैं एक वर्नाक्युलर न्यूज़पेपर से भी जुड़ा हुआ, वहाँ पे हमारे पास ऐसे काफ़ी केसेस आए, लोग भी आए, बाद में लोगों के मुंह से भी सुना, यानी जिससे सद बीती है उसके मुंह से, यानी ऐसा नहीं कि किसी और ने कहा. तो वो सब चीज़ों को मैं कहता हूँ याद करना नहीं चाहता.
While growing up, Rizwan Safar and Zaida never felt religion was an issue. They shared their lives with friends from other communities. In Gujarat, Muslims have always lived together with other communities, Hindus, Jains, Sindhis, and Parsis, and interacted with them on a day-to-day basis.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Ahmedabad, the largest city in Gujarat, had a unique city plan and architecture. This still exists in its old parts, and that reflects this communal harmony. Here, everyone lived close to each other, but each community resided in a distinct area. Yatin Pandya, a veteran architect who has documented the old city, points out that the closely built houses reflected the trust the communities had on each other.
Great example of mutual interdependence and symbiosis. You can leave your child in the supervision of your neighbors, and you could be feel secured and safe about it. So there was this traditional wisdom which had stemmed from the realities of place and people. That was in the socio-cultural term, in some of social cohesion, mutual interdependence, etc. Even the skills and goods were exchanged accordingly.
The architecture in the old city was distinct for that time, as it combined Islamic ideals with local building practices.
I would say 600 years ago, when the city was founded by an Islamic ruler, but under the kind of resources of the Hindu craftsmen known with certain styles of building things. So for example, Ahmedabad has beautiful mosque. You see in the same axis there is Jami Mosque, and if you see the Jami Mosque, it still comes out of the trebiated construction of column and the beam, and yet it represents Islamic arch in terms of a kind of a sort of external applique, sort of an element to associate and remind you of the particular faith and culture.
The first buildings gave birth to a new term, Indo-Saracenic architecture, which combined Islamic and non-Islamic elements.
For example, here there is a urn, then on top there is a coconut, and then there are these asopalav leaves, which is arguably very Hindu kind of common auspicious element to be found. In fact, you always find these matkas and this hung on every front of the pores.
In the residential areas, Muslim houses were no different from that of other communities. These were built of wood and designed to protect against the long summer months. The rooms were laid out to give privacy to different members of the family.
कि ये करीब 100 साल से ये मकान है। ये महलों की खूबी ये है कि इसके अंदर सूरज का किरण उगते वक्त भी नहीं गिरता और डूबते वक्त में, दोनों ही वक्त में एक दूसरे के शेड आते हैं, जिसकी वजह से ये महलों के अंदर सबसे ज़्यादा ठंडक रहती है। हमारे यहाँ जो पीछे जो 2 ओड्डे होते थे, वो ओड्डों के अंदर जैसे बच्चा बालिग हो जावे तो उस तरह से वो माँ बाप से वो अलग हो जावे।
Living among other trading communities, Muslims too became successful. Their business practices were a source of inspiration. Soon, they too became part of the local folklore, which viewed all Gujaratis as smart businessmen.
गुजरात का हर आदमी पढ़ने वाला जो स्कूल के अंदर पढ़ाई करता है ना, तो पढ़ाई को सिर्फ बराए नाम पढ़ाई के लिए नहीं बनता। वो ये सोचता है इसमें से मुझे क्या मिलेगा। वो जब उसका सोशल स्टडी पढ़ता है तो वो सोचता है इसमें से मुझे क्या मिलेगा। वो इकोनॉमिक्स पढ़ता है तो इकोनॉमिक्स के रूल्स एंड रेगुलेशन को समझता है कि इकोनॉमिक्स क्या कहता है, कि भाई जब वस्तु माल का पुरवठा बढ़ेगा तो वस्तु का दाम घटेगा। गुजरात का मोस्ट ऑफ लोग ये सोचता है कि मुझे कुछ करके दिखाना है, मैं कुछ बनना चाहता हूँ, मैं कुछ करना चाहता हूँ।
Trade became an important binding factor between Hindus and Muslims. Gaurang Jani, a professor of sociology in Gujarat University, is familiar with Hindu-Muslim relations.
There are a number of such examples which clearly shows that Hindus and Muslims, they are part and parcel of this Gujarati society, not today, since centuries. But the contemporary generation, they don't know how the relationship between Islam through culture with the Hindu culture. So that is the close relationship between Hindus and Muslims in Gujarat.
However, this did not mean that there was no communal tensions in Gujarat. People did business with others and lived close to each other, but they did continue to have prejudices. In the democratic process, political parties favored certain groups to ensure that they would vote for them in elections. This would lead to other groups feeling marginalized. The tensions that would build up would be used by opposing political forces to incite violence against communities. The first large-scale riots took place in 1969. Initially, people thought that this was an aberration and life came back to normal. Then, the riots happened again in 1985. After this, riots occurred at regular intervals across Gujarat in 1987, 1990, and 1992. However, after each riot, Gujaratis, Hindus, and Muslims went back to what they do best, doing business with each other.
Our factories have been destroyed every time. In 69, we were destroyed, 85, 87, 90, 92. This has come from our forefather. Chalo, theek hai, hua hai. Let's come up. A rider, when he sits on the horseback, the horse throws him. But then he again, and then he is thrown, and he is again. So then a time comes that firmly he sits on the saddle. So yes, it's not easy, but you have to come with a positive frame of mind.
In 2002, for the first time, many in Gujarat felt vulnerable. What was alarming was that the rioters were no longer lumpen elements or extremists. They came from all sections of society, rich and poor. Muslims and Hindus drifted apart. They continued to do business with each other, but not necessarily live with each other. Zafar Sarashwala's business has been damaged once again in the 2002 riots, but his family felt that they had to take initiative in helping people who had suffered much more.
We had an option. We could have taken our shops anywhere, but we ourselves started our office from this place itself. But anybody else could not have gone anywhere other than this. When people didn't have money, we explained to them that look, start here. You will start making money. And then you are a community which believes in fate. So whatever happened is your fate. Your muqaddar, taqdeer. Move again and move on.
Many wondered if they could ever conduct their business like before. Rizwan was concerned whether his non-Muslim clients would continue to work with him.
क्लाइंट मेरे टैलेंट्स और मेरे ऑनेस्टी और मेरे मतलब में जो एटीट्यूड है सबसे मेरे रिस्पेक्ट करते हैं, तो उससे मतलब मैं ऐसा भरोसा नहीं उठ गया था कि सब कुछ खलास हो जाएगा, मगर टाइम बिंग ऐसा कह सकते हैं कि दोनों के बीच की एक दीवार खड़ी हो गई थी, यानी इनविजिबल एक दीवार थी कि जो दोनों के बीच का थोड़ा ट्रस्ट नॉमिनल कम हो गया था। मगर मेरे को भरोसा था कि वो मेरे को एक्सेप्ट कर लेंगे, मैं उनको एक्सेप्ट कर लूँगा, कि हमारे दोनों के बीच में कैसे ये सब चीज़ों में ऐसा नहीं कह सकते कि 100% इंसान को 100% इंसानियत से भरोसा उठ गया था।
It was very much difficult for me because I was the mother for the first time. I did not know how to take care of the child. I did not even know the basic necessities, that I need this or I need that. Like when my child was crying, I was confused that which medicine to give, because I had only 2 or 3. I was very pretty sure that doctors will not be available. Calling an emergency ambulance and taking somewhere is always in extreme, and even that would not be had been possible because they had so many people, you know, burning and gunshotted people to take care of. So I was very sure that even if I need, I won't be getting all those facilities also.
Young Muslims were also affected by the 2002 riots. Muslim students had missed their exams due to the riots. Zafar realized this meant that they would miss out a year of education and their future would be at stake.
There were at least 6,000 plus Muslim boys and girls who had prepared for their exams, and they came in the refugee camp. They were traumatized. And there was this big hue and cry going in the community that we should boycott exams. I remember I used to call from England to my brothers, Khuda ke waaste, exam dilwao in bachcho ko. If they miss their exams today, they'll only get the lip service today. Tomorrow, though, nobody would be even taking care of these boys.
Zaida's main concern was to get back safely to her husband, who was staying outside Ahmedabad at the time.
So I caught Shatabdi, which was the smallest time-consuming train that time. My husband from Vapi said that arrange a police protection for yourself when you and the child are traveling from the house to the railway station. There should not be any hazards in it. The things were so difficult that you need police protection, you need mental support, तुमको सामान भी चाहिए, तुमको जाने का भी है. So what to do and what not to do is a very big question. But that time I felt that Ahmedabad is not a place to live with your children.
Zafar, who was in England initially, started a campaign against the state government of Gujarat, accusing them of not doing enough to prevent the riots. He also pointed out that specific politicians were responsible for the riots. His case garnered considerable media coverage in India as well as across the world. He later met Narendra Modi, the present Prime Minister of India, then Chief Minister of Gujarat, during the riots. The meeting made him change his mind, and he decided to return to India. On his return, he decided to focus on those who suffered during the riots. He knew that the real challenge would be to help families to get back to their normal lives.
Although we are the victims in every riot, and my family has always been in the process of rehabilitation also, both ways. So I was absolutely dead against running off refugee camps for long. So even in 2002, my brothers were part of the refugee camp which were being run. It was our Muslims who wanted to close down the refugee camps as soon as possible, because we don't want the community to come out as beggars.
Frankly, मैं आपको जो बताऊं तो मतलब मैं कैसा कि इंसानियत पे भरोसा उठ गया था, मगर इतना भी भरोसा नहीं उठ गया था कि मतलब मैं कल से टेररिस्ट बन जाऊँ या कल से इंडिया छोड़ के भाग जाऊँ.
The months following the riots threw up many challenges for Zafar, Rizwan, and Zaida. They were not sure how they would be able to rebuild their lives. Zaida had slipped into a role of a homemaker. In the years immediately after 2002, she was busy with her family and had little time for the outside world. But she felt that something was missing and wanted to engage with her community.
I started working as a teacher. I started teaching 11th and 12th standard students with accountancy and statistics, which were my major subjects. And again, time clash came, managing the family and the profession became a bit difficult. So I thought that somehow they are getting deprived of my attention, and I quit that job, and once again I decided to become a housewife for a year, and I took up my degree course. I did my bachelor's of education, taking the break from my teaching profession. But meanwhile, I was teaching less privileged children at my house of 11th and 12th standard, because those are career based standards.
Zaida started to volunteer part-time at another school that focused on providing education for poor children. The aim was to create a positive environment for the child to learn. Soon, Zaida became involved in designing the curriculum and helping out in running the school on a day-to-day basis. She realized that this kind of school was important for children from her community.
Education for a girl child is must if you want educated males in the society. Where does a male child procure knowledge from? My Quran says that mother's womb and mother's lap is the first school for a child. Now, if that is illiterate, if that is empty, if it does not have any knowledge, what will that child get? Then if the father is earning millions and sending the child to some multinational school, I don't think that boy could ever procure knowledge.
With the support of his partners, Rizwan was back in the thick of action. Ahmedabad was growing and new housing colonies were needed. His clients retained his services, and soon there were several new projects on the horizon.
ऊपर वाले की दया से ऐसा कर सकते कभी भी तकलीफ नहीं पड़ी, इंसानियत पे भरोसा रहा, पार्टनरों का सपोर्ट रहा, लोगों का भी सपोर्ट रहा, ऐसा कभी प्रॉब्लम नहीं रहा. डिस्ट्रस्ट धीमे धीमे जो कुछ भी टाइम बिंग हुआ होगा वो मतलब मैं बिल्कुल चला गया हुआ है, वो ऐसा कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं.
Safar had a choice of staying back in UK, but had intentionally come back to India. When he started rebuilding his life, he realized that the traditional family businesses may not work in the new economy. A new class of professionals who were earning well wanted to spend money on products that reflected their lifestyle. Safar decided that he wanted to move away from the old city and open his showroom in a new and upcoming commercial part of Ahmedabad. Initially, getting land for the showroom was difficult. Additionally, his colleagues felt that there was no demand for such a premium product in Gujarat. But Safar was convinced that Ahmedabad had great potential for the brand. Once the business opened, it was a success.
In 2008, we started this. It was a much smaller premises, and now in last 5 years, as you can see this is now at least 7 to 8 times bigger than what it was earlier. We believed that Gujarat is going to be a role model for success. Last 5 years since we are into this BMW business, we have been winning number of awards in our category. Generally, it's been good.
At the school, several colleagues noticed how Zaida's leadership skills would be an asset to the organization. She was offered the job of the principal. Around the same time, Zaida had already been offered a job with better pay at another educational institution. but she decided to stay with this school since this would help her contribute to the community.
My school is not just the curriculum school which teaches just some languages and some subjects. We teach Quran, we teach Arabic as a language. So the child is not just getting the worldly knowledge, the child is procuring both the knowledge, if that we can say that the Dini Talim and the Asri Talim. Dini Talim is the religion and Asri Talim is the basic knowledge needed to survive in this world, that is the maths and the science and the geography. Now this Dini Talim is not, we don't just say that you have to pray 5 times a namaz and keep roza and you have to believe in Allah. Islam teaches that how to be a good human first of all.
Rizwan, Zaida, and Safar had been able to turn around their lives and reinvent themselves. They belonged to the educated middle and upper class of India and had re-equipped themselves with new skills needed in a rapidly modernizing economy. But this was not the case for Muslims belonging to the bottom rung of the ladder. The educated middle-class Muslims have been able to turn around their lives and become part of a modernizing India, but this is not the case of the poor. Thousands of Muslims in villages and small towns across Gujarat were displaced during the 2002 riots. They were unable to return to their homes. Some even fled Gujarat, fearing for their safety. Those who stayed back faced other challenges. Renting or buying a house became very difficult for Muslims. Even well-off families faced this problem. The mistrust created by the riots remained. Interaction between Hindus and Muslims reduced to a minimal. This was a lasting legacy of the 2002 riots. For Rizwan, today it may seem like business as usual. However, being an architect, he confronts the fact that the society is more divided than before. The city is no longer cosmopolitan the way it was earlier. Rizwan's new house is in a Muslim-dominated locality. He knows of many Muslims who are not able to buy land or property in places of their choice. New private colonies have unwritten laws that prevent sale of property to Muslims.
2002 के बाद का गुजरात का सिनेरियो इतना वर्स्ट हो चुका है कि जस्ट लाइक अ सैटेलाइट टाउन हो गया और मतलब मैं अभी भी बहुत मुश्किल से जैसे 5 to 10% एरिया है कि जहाँ साथ में बिजनेस चल रहा है, दैट इज़ ओल्ड सिटी. 2002 के बाद माहौल थोड़ा नहीं कह सकते वर्स्ट हो चुका है कि वो उसके हिसाब से देखा जाए तो.
While traveling to work, Rizwan often drives through several parts of Ahmedabad. One such place is Jayapura, which was established 4 decades ago. At that time, it had a mixed population. However, since it was at the outskirts of the city, the houses here belonged to the poor. After the riots, displaced Muslims from all over Gujarat started moving into Jayapura. In a few years, this became a Muslim-dominant area. With the population explosion, the houses came up haphazardly. There was no proper planning. Construction quality was substandard, and people were forced to live in constricted spaces. Due to a lack of space, new residents began to take over the land reserved for a waste treatment plant.
ऑन पेपर पे ये जगह बोलती है सॉलिड वेस्ट ट्रीटमेंट प्लांट के रिजर्वेशन के लिए, यानी थियोरेटिकली ये जगह मतलब ऑलरेडी रिजर्वेशन के लिए जगह अलॉट की हुई थी. उसके बावजूद लोगों ने मतलब मैं जो कुछ भी अपने खेत उस टाइम पे खेत थे कि अपने लोगों ने खेत वालों ने बेचा, बिल्डरों ने छोटे मोटे मकान बनाए और मकान बना के नेक्स्ट डे मकान बनाए और मकान की क्वालिटी भी देख सकते हो और जो भी आप देखो स्टेयर के साथ देख सकते हो तो कैसी है, मतलब मैं कितनी विड्थ छोटी है बाहर से.
Unlike the rest of the city, this is an urban mess. The streets are not paved and drains non-existent. And yet more and more Muslims are moving here because they feel safer. The mistrust between the two communities has reached a point where residential areas are divided by high walls. This divide is referred to as the border by the residents. In most cases, this is done by private housing societies. The walls create a protective enclave for them with CCTVs and barbed wiring. The religious divide that the wall creates is obvious, since it is Muslims who live in poorer parts that are excluded by the walls. This is not just about separating the rich from the poor, but Muslims from non-Muslims. There is no law allowing this, but new housing societies are building these high walls. These walls in new parts of Ahmedabad are a far cry from the mixed communities of the old city. But the divide hasn't stopped many Muslims from building a new future for themselves professionally. The business acumen of the Gujarat Muslim is back with a vengeance. They do look at the future differently.
I think it's the first election which has been fought on development model of a state. Now you can have issues whether Gujarat has developed or not developed. That's actually a separate debate. But to fight an election based on a model, and that is growth model, economic development, a model of infrastructure, model of 24/7 electricity, model of roads. This is for the first time an election has been fought on bread and butter. I think this is coming of age of Indian politics.
This is the way we press forward when we are being farmers. This is the way we dig.
At the school, the attendance has improved and more parents are wanting their children to join. People in Zaida's community have begun to appreciate the need for education. Earlier, they would not bother about sending the child to a school.
If I share a recent experience of mine, I had admissions open for junior KG class, which ended in 2.5 days. My vacancy was almost full, everything was over. A mother kept on coming repeatedly, admission chahiye. I was like, I'm sorry, I don't have an option, I don't have the vacancy. So she said that, do you have benches in your classes? I said, yes, I do have. So, don't make my child sit on the bench, make her sit on the floor without a bench, but I want my child to come to your school.
Now Zaida is getting inquiries from parents who live in far-off localities. They are willing to make the effort to send their children to this school. When it comes to her own children, Zaida feels the same way. Good education can help prepare the child for the real world when she grows up.
My child is studying in a co-ed school, and every time I ask her that who is sitting next to you, it is always a boy. And every time I go to the school, the teacher says that she is sitting with boys, fighting and winning. So my Soha is a strong person, and I would like her to use her abilities in a better way. But for her future, I think she should select a profession where she can balance the family life and the professional life. Neither should suffer or neither should sacrifice.
For the Muslims of Gujarat, it has been a challenging journey since 2002. Today, there is a sense of hope that the future will be a better place. Safar, Zaida and Rizwan have overcome many hurdles and have created a better life for themselves and many people in their community.
मेरी प्रैक्टिस जो कुछ भी है ऊपर वाले की दया से काफ़ी अच्छी है, मगर उस वक्त मैंने ये ध्यान नहीं दिया कि प्रैक्टिस क्या होता है, प्रैक्टिस मेरे 2 गुना या 3 गुना होती, मगर वो दिमाग में नहीं रहा जो एज में लोग मेरे को वो भी बोलते हैं कि आपके जो 60 साल की उम्र में जो करना था 30 साल की उम्र में आपने स्टार्ट कर दिया, मगर माहौल वक्त ने बोला कि भाई ये आज की ज़रूरत है, तो उसके हिसाब से उस वक्त में जुड़ गए हम लोग.
Situations have definitely changed, drastically changed, and it is becoming better day by day, more safer, because that time I could not imagine sending my son 17 kilometers away from my house for a schooling. Like every day going 17 kilometers one way is a long distance, traveling in a bus. No doubt it's a school bus, but then again he's on the road where neither the school is responsible nor I. But it's becoming safe nowadays, and I can see him going out alone and coming back safely. So that's the good part of the story.
Is that there are 18 skills which Muslim boys have inbuilt, inborn. Will somebody harness those skills? Will that boy remain a mechanic all his life? Is there somebody, he asked us, will you not harness that? So skill alone is not important. You need polishing with education. And once you have that, then you need honesty. If you have these three combinations, nobody can discriminate against you.
The Muslims of Gujarat are not just a story of doom and gloom. Among them are educated individuals, free of prejudice, taking their rightful place in the workforce of modern India.